Before there was day or night, for fire, frost, or form, there was nothing. But it wasn't the kind of nothing that humans can imagine. It was deeper than silence. It was older than darkness. It was called Ginnungagap, the yawning void. The ancient Norse didn't see this as empty space, but as a breathing stillness, a place where all possibilities slept, waiting to be born. From this abyss, existence would stumble into being not by design, but by collision. In the beginning, there were no gods, no stars, no time. Only two primal realms faced one another across the gap. In the north, Niflheim, land of endless ice and mist, where frost storms howled and rivers froze even before they flowed. In the south, Muspelheim, a realm of living fire, of glowing embers and molten chaos ruled by the fire giant Surtur, whose sword blazed with the heat of suns not yet made. Between them was the void, and where the breath of frost met the burning wind, something unimaginable began to stir. To the Norse mind, creation was not born in harmony. It came from struggle, from the union of opposites that could not coexist. The gods had not yet been dreamed of, so only chaos and hunger existed. Yet even in this conflict, life found a way. From melting ice and rising vapor, from flame and chill came movement, and from movement came the first heartbeat of existence. What would follow was not creation as comfort, it was creation as violence, as necessity, as the first desperate breath of the cosmos. This was how the Norse saw their world, fragile, temporary, built from sacrifice, and destined one day to fall back into the dark it came from. And it all began with a giant. Before the world began, Ginnungagap and the birth of Ymir, at the edge of everything. Where frost met flame, a great mist rose up. Within that mist, the first being took form, Ymir, the primal giant. He was neither god nor man, neither pure good nor evil. He simply was. His flesh was the earth's first matter, vast, cold, and alive with the pulse of potential. From his armpits, beings began to emerge, and from his sweat, more life dripped into being. Ymir was a living universe, his body birthing children not from love or intention, but from the chaotic fertility of existence itself. The Norse did not believe the universe began with order or peace. They believed it began with a giant who was both father and mother, life and death. As Ymir walked the emptiness, the frost continued to melt, and from the flowing rivers of Niflheim came another wonder, a great cow named Audhumla. She was gentle, ancient, and sacred, feeding Ymir with 4 streams of milk from her abundant udders. She, too, was born from the ice, and like Ymir, she carried the potential for creation within her. But Audhumla hungered. She licked the salty ice to feed herself, and as she did, something new began to emerge from within the frozen wall. First hair, then flesh, then a face. And from the frost was born Buri, the first of the gods. He stood radiant and strong, the first conscious being not born from chaos but from purpose. From him would descend Buro, and from Buro, Odin, Vili, and Vi, the 3 brothers who would shape the fate of all realms. This moment, the birth of gods from the body of the cosmos, marked the beginning of divine will, the spark of intention in a world that had only known chance. The Norse understood that existence was a chain of hungers. The frost melts, the cow feeds, the giant grows, and from that growth comes conflict. The universe was alive, but its balance was fragile. The death of Ymir and the making of the world. As the gods grew in strength, they saw in Ymir both their ancestor and their obstacle. The giant's body filled the void, his children multiplied, and his presence choked the space needed for creation. Ymir was everything, and because he was everything, nothing new could exist. So Odin and his brothers made a terrible decision, to kill the being from whom all life came. The battle was not glorious, it was catastrophic. When Ymir fell, his wounds opened the floodgates of the world. His blood poured out like oceans, drowning countless giants. From the ruins of his colossal body, the gods began their work. They crafted the world from his remains. His flesh became the earth, his bones the mountains, his teeth the stones, his skull the sky, and his blood the seas. His hair grew into forests, and from his brains clouds drifted through the newborn heavens. The Norse saw this not as cruelty, but as the first necessary sacrifice. Creation, in their eyes, was always paid for in blood. The world itself was a corpse, animated by divine will, and within that corpse, humanity would one day live, To the people who told these stories, the very soil beneath their feet was sacred because it was once alive. Every mountain was a bone, every river a vein. Above this world, the gods placed sparks from Muspelheim into Ymir's skull, lighting the sky with stars. And beneath it all, they set Niflheim, the dark roots of creation, as a reminder that every world rests upon the remnants of another. The gods had shaped a realm of order from the ruins of chaos, but deep down, they knew the blood of the giants still flowed beneath it all. Creation of humanity, Ask and Embla. When the gods had finished crafting the earth, the seas and the sky, they walked along the new shore. Waves lapped gently against their feet, and among the seaweed and driftwood lay two pieces of wood, lifeless but oddly shaped, one like a man, one like a woman. Odin looked upon them and felt something stir within him. He knelt, and from his breath came life. His brother Vili gave them mind and will, while V shaped their form and senses. Thus the first humans were born, Ask the ash tree man, and Embla, the elm tree woman, were fragile, unaware of what they were. But they were alive, and that alone was enough to make them divine in their own way. The gods gave them Midgard, the middle realm, encircled by a great wall made from Ymir's eyebrows to protect them from the chaos beyond. It was a small world, balanced precariously between the higher realms of gods and the lower realms of monsters. To the Norse, this was the greatest miracle of all, that from wood and will, consciousness could arise. Humanity was not an afterthought or an accident. It was the final act of divine craftsmanship. But there was also melancholy in their origin. Humans were not meant to be gods, nor giants. They were fragile, mortal, and exposed to a universe that cared little for their survival. Yet in their weakness lay their strength, the ability to endure, to build, and to dream, even in a world built from death. The 9 realms and the world tree, Yggdrasil. The gods did not create only one world. From Ymir's remains they built 9 realms, each connected and sustained by the roots and branches of the cosmic tree Yggdrasil. At its highest boughs lay Asgard, home of the Aesir gods Odin, Thor, and their kin. Below that, Vanaheim, the land of the Vanir gods of fertility and wisdom. Midgard, the world of humans, sat in the center, surrounded by the vast serpent Jarmungandr. Beyond it lay Jotunheim, realm of the frost giants. Alfheim, home of the light elves. Svartalfheim, the realm of dark elves or dwarves. Niflheim, the world of ice and mist. Muspelheim, the world of fire. And deep below them all, Helheim, the land of the dead. Yggdrasil connected them all, a living organism, whose branches stretched into every sky and whose roots drank from every source. One root reached into Asgard, another into Jotunheim, and the third into Niflheim. Beneath it, 3 wells nourished its life. Ord's well, where the Norns spun the fates of all. Mimir's well, keeper of wisdom, and Hvergelmir, the roaring source of rivers and life. But Yggdrasil suffered too. A dragon named Nidhogg gnawed at its roots, while stags ate its leaves, and eagles perched high in its crown. Even the world tree, symbol of all connection, was never at peace. To the Norse, this was the essence of existence. Even the holiest things decay. Life, wisdom, and suffering were all part of one endless cycle. The tree would stand for eons until the end came, and all realms would fall. The 9 realms, the architecture of the Norse cosmos. When the gods had shaped the earth from Ymir's remains and breathed life into humanity, they turned their gaze outward, for the world was not alone. Around the newly born Midgard, the gods wove a tapestry of existence unlike any other. They crafted 9 realms, each suspended within the vast structure of the cosmos, each serving a purpose in the great cycle of life, death, and rebirth. These worlds did not hang in space as planets might, but existed more like intertwined layers of reality bound together, yet distinct in essence and energy. At the highest reaches lay Asgard, the shining realm of the Aesir gods, whose halls gleamed with gold and whose walls were built by giants, yet sealed by divine hands. It was here that Odin ruled from his high seat, Lidskilf, from which he could look upon all worlds. Below it lay Vanaheim, the home of the Vanir gods of fertility, peace, and foresight, who would one day become rivals and allies of the Aesir. Together, these two divine realms embodied the tension between war and wisdom, chaos and cultivation. At the center of everything was Midgard, the human world, a fragile sphere of life surrounded by the coiling sea serpent, Jarmungandr. Beyond Midgard stretched Jotunheim, the land of the giants, ancient beings born from the same primordial forces as Ymir himself. The giants were neither evil nor good. They were the wildness of the universe given flesh. Their storms and mountains were as much part of nature's truth as the gods' order was. And beneath these realms, in the deep shadows, lay others. Svartalfheim, where dwarves labored in forges of stone. Alfheim, where radiant elves danced in eternal twilight. And Helheim, the silent land of the dead. Further still were the elemental extremes. Muspelheim, realm of eternal fire, where Surtur stood with his flaming sword awaiting the world's end. And Niflheim, realm of ice, mist, and slow decay, the echo of the world that once was. Each realm had its purpose, its rhythm. The Norse did not imagine them as separate heavens and hells, but as interlocking gears of one great breathing mechanism, a system of balance. In this architecture of 9 worlds, humanity was not at the top nor the bottom, but in the middle, a bridge between mortality and divinity. To live in Midgard was to be part of a living universe, surrounded by gods, monsters, and mysteries that echoed the same struggles men felt within themselves. The Norse saw the cosmos not as something to conquer but to endure, a web of fates too vast to comprehend, yet intimately close to the human heart. Yggdrasil, the great tree of worlds. At the center of this vast entangled universe rose Yggdrasil, the world tree, the spine of all creation. Its roots pierced the deepest shadows, its branches brushed the highest stars, and every realm clung to it like a leaf on an eternal bough. The Norse did not see Yggdrasil merely as a tree. It was existence itself, the pulse of life that bound gods, giants, men, and spirits into one trembling whole. Its 3 roots stretched to 3 sacred wells. The first, Urd's well, lay in Asgard beneath the watch of the Norns. 3 sisters who spun the fates of gods and men alike, Urd for what has been, Verdandi for what is, and Skuld for what shall be. Even the gods bowed before them, for fate was older than divinity. The second route reached into Jotunheim, where the wise giant Ymir guarded his well of knowledge. Odin himself would one day pay a terrible price for a single drink of that wisdom. The third route plunged into Niflheim, where the roaring well Havergilmir gave birth to all rivers and nourished the underworld. Yet Yggdrasil was no symbol of peace. Beneath its roots, the dragon Nidhogg gnawed endlessly, devouring its bark and feeding on the corpses of the damned. High above, a great eagle perched among the branches, spreading its wings wide as clouds. Between them scurried a mischievous squirrel named Ratatoskr, carrying insults and whispers back and forth, a cosmic reminder that even within the structure of creation, discord never sleeps. The stags that grazed its leaves represented hunger and decay, while the dew that dripped from its branches nourished all beings below. The Norse understood Yggdrasil as a living paradox, ever growing, ever dying. Its strength was its suffering. Its eternity was its decay. The gods gathered daily at its roots, knowing that even their divine power was sustained by the same fragile balance that kept the tree alive. Every rustle of its leaves was a sign that fate was moving. Every creak of its trunk was a whisper of things yet to come. And though Yggdrasil seemed eternal, the seers spoke of a day when its branches would tremble, its roots would break, and the fire of Muspelheim would consume its heart. On that day, the worlds would fall, and the gods would face their doom. But until then, Yggdrasil stood tall, breathing life into a cosmos that knew no peace. Only the endless rhythm of creation, struggle, and renewal. Odin the Allfather, the seeker of wisdom. In the golden halls of Asgard sat Odin, the Allfather, king of the gods, father of kings, master of runes, and wanderer between worlds. But Odin's greatness was not measured in strength or power. It was measured in sacrifice. Unlike the gods of other pantheons, Odin was not born all-knowing. He was a seeker, restless, relentless, willing to suffer endlessly for the truth. His rule was not of comfort, but of curiosity. When he looked upon Yggdrasil, he did not see glory. He saw mystery. He hungered to understand the forces that bound gods and men alike, the hidden threads of destiny woven by the Norns. In his pursuit, Odin made a choice that few beings could endure. He approached the well of Mimir, where wisdom lay deep beneath shimmering waters, and demanded a drink. Mimir warned him that the cost was terrible. Odin did not hesitate. He plucked out his own eye and dropped it into the well, a pledge of eternal sacrifice. From that day he saw with only one eye, but what he saw went beyond sight. He saw truth. Still, it was not enough. Knowledge haunted him like hunger. So Odin performed the greatest ritual of self-sacrifice ever told. He hung himself upon Yggdrasil, pierced by his own spear, suspended for 9 days and 9 nights without food or drink. In agony, he gazed into the void, dying and being reborn at once. From that suffering, the runes revealed themselves to him, symbols of power, magic, and understanding that shaped the language of gods and men. Odin's wisdom was never passive. He was a wanderer, cloaked in gray, hat pulled low, walking among mortals under many names.
Ow!
He sought stories, counsel, and secrets in every realm. He valued cunning as much as courage, for he knew that strength fades but knowledge endures. Yet, for all his power, Odin's greatest burden was his foresight. He alone knew how the world would end. He had seen Ragnarok, the death of gods, the fire, the darkness, and the rebirth beyond. And though he knew his fate, he did not flee it. He prepared. Every deed, every war, every whispered plan, all were steps toward the inevitable twilight. Odin was not merely a god of wisdom, he was wisdom itself, restless, costly, and dangerous. In him the Norse saw both the nobility and the tragedy of knowledge, that to see deeply is to suffer deeply, and that even a god must bleed to understand. Frigg and the power of fate. If Odin was the mind of Asgard, Frigg was its heart. She was queen of the gods, mother of Baldr, and the quiet keeper of destiny's most secret threads. Frigg was no mere consort. She ruled her own hall Fensalir, where she wove the fates of kings and heroes with a calm that even Odin could not match. Where her husband sought wisdom through torment, Frigg already knew, and bore her knowledge with silent grace. Frigg possessed the gift of foresight, but unlike Odin, she spoke of it rarely. To her, prophecy was not a weapon or a tool, it was a burden. She saw the deaths of her loved ones long before they came and carried that sorrow in silence. The gods revered her not for power, but for the serenity with which she faced inevitability. She embodied the Norse ideal of stoic wisdom, that strength lies not in preventing fate, but in meeting it with dignity. Her most famous tale was that of her son, Baldr, the most beloved of the gods. When she foresaw his death, Frigg traveled across the worlds, pleading with every creature, stone, and element not to harm him. All swore an oath, all except the mistletoe, which seemed too small to matter. Yet in that oversight lay tragedy. When Baldr was struck down by a dart made of mistletoe, guided by Loki's cunning hand, Frigg's grief echoed through all realms. Even Hel, goddess of the underworld, wept for her sorrow. Through Frigg, the Norse understood that love and loss are twin threads in the same weave. She was the eternal reminder that even gods cannot escape pain, that to love deeply is to suffer deeply. Yet her wisdom endured beyond despair. She taught that fate cannot be undone, but that compassion and courage can make it bearable. In the end, Frigg stood as the quiet counterpoint to Odin's restless quest. Where he sought to know fate, she sought to live with it. And in her stillness, there was a power greater than war or wisdom, the power to endure what even gods could not change. Thor, protector of Midgard. Among all the gods of Asgard, none was loved by humanity more than Thor, the Thunderer, the protector of mankind, and the hammer of the giants. While Odin sought wisdom in shadows and Frigg wove fate in silence, Thor's world was action, raw, thunderous, and righteous. His was the roar of storms, the flash of lightning, the crash of hammer against mountain. In him the Norse saw the perfect guardian, not flawless, but steadfast. Thor was the son of Odin, and Yor, the personification of earth itself. From his mother, he inherited his boundless strength and his duty to protect the mortal world. He wielded the mighty hammer Mjolnir, forged by the dwarves Brokkr and Sindri in the dark halls of Svartalfheim. It was more than a weapon, it was a symbol of balance, a tool that sanctified marriages and defended gods and men alike. When the hammer struck, it returned to Thor's hand, its thunder echoing through the 9 realms. But Thor's greatness lay not in his might alone. He represented the force that held chaos at bay. The giants' embodiments of untamed nature constantly threatened the fragile order of Asgard and Midgard. Thor's endless battles against them were not mere displays of power, but sacred rituals of preservation. Every storm that shattered the sky was seen as his doing, the sound of his hammer crushing yet another force of destruction. Yet Thor was not without flaw. He was quick to anger, easily provoked, and sometimes mocked by the other gods for his simplicity. But the Norse loved him precisely for that, for being honest, unpretentious, and loyal. He did not seek power or glory. He sought to protect. To the farmers, sailors, and warriors of the North, Thor was not distant or philosophical like Odin. He was their god, one who understood toil, sweat, and struggle. And when the storm clouds gathered, they knew he was near, watching over them. Loki, the trickster of the gods. Where Thor represented protection and order, Loki embodied chaos, deceit, and changed the spark that could ignite creation or destruction. He was not a god in the traditional sense, but a shapeshifter, a boundary breaker, and the eternal outsider of Asgard. Born of giants yet welcomed among the Aesir, Loki was both friend and foe, the flame that could warm or burn the world. Loki's cleverness was unmatched. He could weave words like silk and twist truths into daggers. When the gods found themselves in impossible situations, it was often Loki who found the solution, though sometimes it was his mischief that caused the problem in the first place. He once tricked a master builder into forfeiting his payment for building Asgard's walls, seduced as a mare to distract the builder's stallion, and from that union birthed the 8-legged steed Sleipnir, the very horse Odin would ride into battle. Yet, beneath the laughter and lies, there was darkness. Loki's mischief slowly grew into malice, and his jokes became tragedies. His envy and resentment toward the gods festered, culminating in the cruelest act of all, the death of Baldr, the purest of the gods. When Frigg had secured oaths from all things not to harm her son, Loki discovered that the mistletoe had been overlooked. He fashioned it into a dart and guided the blind god Hadra's hand to throw it. When Baldr fell, the laughter of Asgard died with him. From that moment, Loki's fate was sealed. The gods hunted him down, bound him beneath the earth with the entrails of his own son, and placed a serpent above his face to drip venom upon him for eternity. His wife Sigyn remained at his side, catching the venom in a bowl, but whenever she turned away to empty it, the poison struck, and Loki's screams became earthquakes. He would remain there until the end of days, until Ragnarok, when his chains would break and his vengeance would begin. Loki was not evil in the simple sense. He was necessary. Norse myth. Chaos is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a force that drives destiny forward. Loki was the shadow of the gods, the reminder that no order can exist without the threat of its undoing. Heimdall, guardian of the Rainbow Bridge, standing at the edge of Asgard, where the Bifrost, the shimmering rainbow bridge, arched toward the mortal realm, stood Heimdall, the ever-watchful guardian. Known as the Shining God, Heimdall was born of 9 mothers, each a sea maiden, and thus he embodied the brightness of dawn rising over the waves. His senses were sharper than any being's. He could hear grass grow, see 400s of leagues, and needed less sleep than a bird. Heimdall's duty was absolute, to guard Asgard from intruders and herald the coming of the gods' final battle. He possessed the great horn Jallarhorn, whose blast would echo across all realms to signal Ragnarok's arrival. Calm, noble, and incorruptible, Heimdall was the silent sentinel of divine order, the counterbalance to Loki's chaos. Their enmity was ancient and destined, for prophecy foretold that they would kill each other at the end of the world. But Heimdall was more than a guard. He was a bridge himself between gods and men, light and darkness. Some myths even name him as the one who gave humanity the social order's warriors, farmers and craftsmen, teaching them the ways of civilization. To the Norse, Heimdall's brilliance was not just in light but in clarity, a god who saw truth without distortion. As the watchman of Asgard, Heimdall rarely spoke, His vigilance was his prayer, his silence his strength. And though he stood apart from the feasts and glories of the gods, his role was among the most sacred. For when the end came, it would be Heimdall's horn that broke the peace, and his eyes that first saw the fire in the sky. Baldr the Beautiful and his death. Among all the gods, none shone brighter than Baldr. The son of Odin and Frigg, he was beauty, purity, and light made flesh. The world itself seemed to love him. The flowers turned toward him, and the air shimmered in his presence. But Baldr was haunted by dreams of his own death, and in those dreams, even the immortal trembled. Frigg, desperate to save him, secured oaths from all living things, never to harm her son. All but one, the mistletoe, small and harmless, which she overlooked. The gods, believing Baldr invincible, made a game of throwing weapons at him for sport, watching them fall harmlessly away. Loki, with his quiet smile, watched too and saw opportunity. He crafted a dart of mistletoe, approached Baldr's blind brother Hodder, and guided his hand. When the dart flew, it pierced Baldr's heart. The laughter stopped. The world wept. Even Hel herself offered to release Baldr if every creature wept for him. And all did except one, an old giantess who refused, widely believed to be Loki in disguise. Thus Baldr remained in the underworld, his light extinguished from the world above. Baldr's death marked the beginning of the end. It shattered the peace of Asgard, poisoned the bonds among the gods, and set the stage for Ragnarok. Yet prophecy promised that Baldr would return after the world's rebirth, a symbol that even in the Norse vision of doom, hope was not lost. Light, though slain, would rise again. Tyr and the binding of Fenrir. Of all the gods, Tyr was the embodiment of courage and justice. Before Odin rose to power, Tyr was the original war god, not of bloodlust, but of honor and order. His tale, however, is one of sacrifice, remembered not for conquest, but for a single fateful act of bravery that would define divine integrity forever. When the gods raised the monstrous wolf Fenrir, the offspring of Loki, they soon realized his strength grew faster than they could control. Fearing prophecy that Fenrir would one day devour Odin, they decided to bind him. They tried chains of iron and bronze, but the wolf broke them with ease. They turned to the dwarves, who forged a magical ribbon called Gleipnir, soft as silk but stronger than any metal, made from impossible things. The sound of a cat's footsteps, the roots of a mountain, the beard of a woman, and more. Sensing deceit, Fenrir demanded that one god place a hand in his mouth as a sign of good faith. Only Tyr stepped forward. As the wolf struggled and found himself bound, he bit down, severing Tyr's hand. He did not cry out. His silence was his oath. From that day, Tyr bore his maiming with pride, for it proved that justice sometimes demands pain, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to act despite it. The loss of Tyr's hand was more than physical. It marked the fading of honor in the age of gods. As Asgard drifted closer to chaos, Tyr stood as a reminder of an older virtue, that law and sacrifice are the pillars of true strength. The Vanir, Freya, and the lost gods of fertility. Before the reign of Odin and the Aesir, there existed another pantheon, the Vanir, gods of fertility, prosperity, and peace. While the Aesir embodied war and power, the Vanir represented balance, nature, and the abundance of life. Their conflict with the Aesir marked one of the earliest cosmic wars, a clash not of good and evil, but of opposing forces necessary for creation's harmony. When the Aesir and Vanir went to war, neither could prevail. Eventually, they made peace through an exchange of hostages. Nerd, god of the sea, and his children, Frey and Freya, came to Asgard. From that moment, the two tribes of gods were united, symbolizing the merging of war and fertility, reason and passion. Frey, with his golden boar, Gulin Bursti, and his ship Skidbladnir, that could sail through any wind, became a god of peace, rain, and harvests. Freya, his sister, was a goddess of love, beauty, and magic, but also of death and battle. Half the slain went to her hall Folkvanger, while the other half went to Odin's Valhalla. She was both tender and terrifying, reflecting the Norse view that life and death, love and war, are eternally intertwined. The Vanir's presence in Asgard brought a gentler aspect to the gods, a sense that even in a world of frost and fire, life must bloom. Their union with the Aesir was not conquest, but evolution, the blending of survival and creation into the full spectrum of divine existence. Jotunheim, the land of giants. Far beyond the radiant heavens of Asgard lies a realm where the laws of the gods hold no power. Jotunheim, the land of the giants. This is a world of jagged peaks that pierce the clouds, frozen rivers that groan beneath ancient ice, and winds that howl like wolves across the endless tundra. Here, the Jitner beings of raw, untamed power dwell in defiance of the gods. They are the descendants of Ymir, the first giant, born from the chaotic void long before Odin shaped order from chaos. To the Norse mind, Jotunheim was not evil, but elemental, a reminder that creation itself sprang from struggle. Every storm, avalanche, and roaring sea was believed to echo with the breath of the giants. Yet Jotunheim is more than a place of monsters. It is a world of wisdom and mystery, where power and cunning often outweigh brute force. Odin himself, the Allfather, often crossed into this perilous realm in search of hidden knowledge. He sought counsel from giantesses like Gunla and Vafthrûdnir, who guarded truths that even gods feared to utter. The line between giant and god was never clear. They shared bloodlines, forged pacts, and sometimes fell into deadly rivalries or forbidden loves. The mother of Thor, Yor, was a giantess. The walls between these races were more symbolic than real. Jotunheim thus stood as both enemy and origin, chaos and kinship intertwined. Among its frozen wastes, one might find Utgard, the stronghold of the giants, ruled by the cunning Utgard Loki. It's like his namesake among the gods. This Loki was not a trickster by birth, by intellect, a master of illusion and pride, who once deceived even Thor himself. In these stories, Jotunheim becomes a place where strength alone cannot win, where gods must think, adapt, and sometimes fail. It represents the ungovernable forces of nature that lie beyond divine control, the storms that sink ships, the winters that starve villages, the hunger that no prayer can tame. But despite its harshness, Jotunheim was essential to the balance of the cosmos. Without opposition, there could be no order. Without shadow, no light. The Aesir needed the Ginnungagap, just as fire needs air, to challenge, to test, to remind them that power is never absolute. Each myth that speaks of battle between gods and giants is not merely a tale of war, but of equilibrium. The Norse saw in Jotunheim the eternal truth that creation must always wrestle with chaos. It was the wild reflection of Asgard, unrefined, unbowed, and eternal. And so Jotunheim remains, even in myth, as the howling frontier of existence. The cold breath of the world before order, still whispering through the cracks of Yggdrasil's roots. Alfheim and Svartalfheim. Light elves and dwarves. High above the middle branches of Yggdrasil lies Alfheim, the home of the light elves, beings of brilliance and grace. It is said that when sunlight filters through leaves or dances across calm water, one glimpses Alfheim's reflection. The elves, or Leosalfar, are not the small, winged sprites of later legend, but radiant spirits, embodiments of beauty, fertility, and life's subtle forces. They are the unseen hands that coax flowers from the earth and guide newborn souls into their first breath. Freyr, the god of prosperity, rules this luminous realm, his light blessing both elves and humans alike. In Norse belief, the light elves were not worshipped as gods, but revered as intermediaries, gentle yet powerful. Presences who maintained the harmony of nature. Yet beneath the earth's skin, in caverns thick with smoke and fire, lies Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves, the Kalfur, or dark elves. Unlike their luminous kin, these beings shun the sun, for its touch turns them to stone. But from the darkness, they wrought wonders that defined the mythic age. It was they who forged Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, Gungnir, Odin's spear, the golden hair of Sif, shining brighter than sunlight. Their forges blazed with volcanic heat, and every strike of their hammers echoed through the roots of the world tree. To the Norse, the dwarves represented the mastery of craft, the transformation of the raw and the ugly into the divine. The contrast between these two realms, one radiant and open, the other dark and hidden, mirrored the duality within creation itself. Light and shadow were not enemies, but necessary partners in the cosmic dance. The elves nurtured life, while the dwarves shaped the tools that sustained it. Even the gods depended on their work, binding Asgard's fate to the hands of those who lived beneath it. This was the Norse way, to see beauty not as perfection, but as balance, the coexistence of grace and grit, of art and labor. Legends tell that at times the elves and dwarves clashed, light scorning darkness, darkness envying light, yet both remained part of a greater whole. When Freyr offered gifts to the dwarves in exchange for their craftsmanship, it symbolized the pact between creation and transformation. Without the dwarves, there could be no divine weapons. Without the elves, no divine inspiration. Together, Alfheim and Svartalfheim embodied the Norse belief that every spark of creation begins in shadow, and every shadow exists because something once shone. And so, when the ancients gazed upon sunlight breaking through a storm, they saw not mere weather, but the meeting of two worlds, a fleeting union of light and dark, of elf and dwarf, of beauty and endurance. Helheim, the realm of the dead. Beneath the cold roots of Yggdrasil lies a realm few dared to speak of, Helheim, the land of the dead. It is not a place of fiery torment, nor of divine paradise, but a shadowed domain of silence and sorrow. Now, here dwell those who died not in battle, but in sickness, age, or misfortune. The forgotten souls who did not ascend to Valhalla. They journey down the dark rivers that wind between the roots of the world tree until they reach the gates of hell. A realm ruled by the goddess of the same name, daughter of Loki, half living, half dead. Her face is said to be beautiful on one side and pale and corpse-like on the other, symbolizing the duality of existence itself, life and death bound in one being. The Norse saw Helheim not as punishment, but as inevitability, the resting place for most of humankind. Yet it was also a realm of cold justice, for Hel was no tyrant. She ruled with impartial grace, ensuring that every soul received what it had earned in life. Warriors who fell without glory might wander her gray plains, while the humble farmer or mother might rest peacefully beneath the shadow of her hall, Ymir. But even in this quiet domain, power stirred. Prophecies whispered that during Ragnarok, Hel would unleash her legions of the dead, a tide of shadows marching to the final battlefield, led by her pale hand. Helheim's atmosphere was one of eternal twilight. Frost hung like breath upon the air, and the ground shimmered with the chill of eternal winter. Streams of icy mist coiled around stone bridges guarded by monstrous beings, and the souls of the departed drifted like snow, voiceless and weightless. The living who ventured here, such as Hermod, Odin's messenger, risked not only their lives but their sanity. To look upon Hel was to glimpse the stillness beyond all sound, the truth that even gods must one day face, that all things, even power, fade. In mythic symbolism, Helheim stood for acceptance, the inevitable return of energy to the earth, of light to shadow. It was the counterpoint to Valhalla's endless feasting in battle. Just as the Norse believed in glory through war, they also understood the sanctity of endings. Helheim reminded them that death was not defeat, but a continuation, another realm in the grand architecture of existence. It was the still heartbeat beneath the storm of gods and monsters. Muspelheim, the world of fire. If Helheim was silence and frost, then Muspelheim was its blazing opposite, the eternal world of fire, the first spark in the void. Before creation itself, when only Ginnungagap, the great nothingness, existed, Muspelheim burned at its southern edge. Its flames collided with Niflheim's ice, and from that meeting of extremes, life was born. Thus, fire was both destroyer and creator, a paradox that defined the Norse cosmos. Muspelheim is ruled by Surtur, the Black One, the oldest being of flame. His sword, brighter than the sun, will one day ignite the end of the world. To the ancients, Muspelheim symbolized the primal chaos of energy, the power that both gives and takes. Its fiery winds and molten rivers were not evil, but indifferent, representing the untamed essence of creation. The gods themselves feared this realm, for they knew that one day its flames would rise against Asgard. In the sagas, Surtur stands patiently at the borders of his burning world, awaiting the prophecy of Ragnarok, when he will march northward, sword blazing, to set all existence aflame. Muspelheim was not merely myth. It embodied the Norse understanding of nature's destructive cycles. Volcanoes, lightning, and wildfire were seen as its echoes surters, breath breaking through the boundaries of Midgard. Yet without fire, there could be no warmth, no forge, no life. The dwarves' hammers would be cold, the sun unkindled. Fire was therefore sacred, a god's gift and curse in one. The Norse did not separate creation from destruction. They knew both were siblings, born of the same flame. Even the gods depended upon the fire that might someday consume them. The same divine forge that crafted Thor's hammer drew its heat from Muspelheim's essence. Thus, the myth was never one of simple doom. It was the eternal truth that everything built must one day burn. And from its ashes, something new will rise. Muspelheim, the world of fire, was not only the end, it was also the promise of rebirth. Niflheim, the realm of ice and mist. At the opposite pole of existence from Muspelheim lies Niflheim, the ancient realm of frost, mist, and deathly cold. It was among the first worlds to form a place of eternal night and frozen silence. From its icy rivers flowed the Ylivigr, venomous streams that fed the void of Ginnungagap before creation. When they met the heat of Muspelheim's flame, Ymir was born, the first giant, the ancestor of all beings. Thus Niflheim was the cradle of existence, and paradoxically, its tomb as well. In its heart lies the spring of Ymir, from which all waters flow, guarded by the dragon Yggdrasil, who gnawed endlessly at Yggdrasil's roots. The Norse feared Niflheim not for its malice, but for its emptiness, a place without time or warmth, where even thought might freeze. It represented the stillness before creation and the silence after death. To step into Niflheim was to witness existence unmade, to see what lies before the first dawn and after the last twilight. In some tales, Helheim was said to be a part of Niflheim, its underworld beneath the frozen wastes, showing that cold and death were intertwined, one feeding the other. Yet within its deadly beauty lay a strange serenity. The glacial mountains glittered like mirrors, reflecting the pale light of distant stars. The air shimmered with ghostly mist, and the rivers hummed with ancient whispers. To the poets of the sagas, Niflheim symbolized the memory of creation, the eternal echo of what came before the gods. In their imagination, Yggdrasil's lowest root reached here, drinking from Ymr's cold spring, binding even the frost realm into the life of all worlds. Niflheim and Muspelheim were not enemies, but opposites, the twin pillars of existence. From their clash came all things, fire to shape, ice to preserve, heat to awaken, cold to still. The Norse did not see good or evil in this opposition, only balance. Life, they believed, must always hover between flame and frost, creation and decay, chaos and calm. And when the end comes, these realms will meet again, returning the cosmos to its eternal beginning, a circle of fire and ice. Midgard, the human world and its role in the myths. Between the realms of fire and ice, between the divine and the monstrous, lies Midgard, the world of humankind. It was shaped by Odin and his brothers from Ymir's flesh. His blood became the seas, his bones the mountains, and his skull the heavens. From this sacred body they built a fortress around the world, a boundary of safety within chaos. Midgard, meaning middle enclosure, stood as the bridge between all realms, the fragile balance of mortality amidst gods and giants. Humanity was not an accident of creation. It was its heart, the living reflection of divine order amidst chaos. The Norse saw Midgard as both sanctuary and battlefield. Here gods and giants waged their silent wars through storms and seasons, and mortals carried within them the echoes of that struggle. Every victory, every death, every harvest mirrored the eternal pattern of creation and destruction. Humanity's role was to remember the gods, to live with courage, to honor oaths, and to meet fate with open eyes. For in the Norse worldview, man's life was brief but sacred, because it burned brightly against the vast night of the cosmos. The connection between Midgard and Asgard was guarded by Bifrost, the rainbow bridge watched over by Heimdall. Its colors were said to shimmer with divine energy, linking the mortal and the divine. When storms raged or lightning split the sky, people believed it was the sound of gods crossing the bridge, watching or warring unseen. To live in Midgard was to stand between heaven and hell, between frost and flame, to be both vulnerable and powerful, mortal and mythic at once. In a universe ruled by destiny, Midgard represented choice, the one realm where free will could exist, however briefly. Gods were bound by prophecy, giants by nature, but humans had the power to defy both through courage, creativity, or love. And though mortals would perish long before the end of days, the sagas promised that their deeds, their bravery, their words, their songs would echo forever through Yggdrasil's branches. For the Norse Midgard was not just earth. It was the mirror of existence itself, a reminder that within every person burns both frost and fire, and that to live well is to stand unflinching in their meeting. Fenrir the wolf and his chains. From the depths of chaos came Fenrir, the wolf who would one day devour the world. Born of Loki and the giantess Angerboa, Fenrir was no ordinary beast. His fur was night itself, and his eyes burned like twin embers of rage. Even as a pup, his power terrified the gods. They raised him in Asgard to keep him close, hoping to tame him before his strength grew beyond control. But with each passing year, Fenrir swelled in size until his jaws could stretch from heaven to earth, and his breath stank of destruction. The gods attempted to bind him, first with iron chains, then with magical fetters, yet Fenrir shattered them like straw. Desperation led them to the dwarves, who forged a ribbon from the impossible, the sound of a cat's footsteps, a woman's beard, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, a fish's breath, and a bird's spittle. This silk-thin thread, called Gleipnir, looked delicate as moonlight, but was stronger than fate itself. When they lured Fenrir to test it, he sensed deceit and demanded one of the gods place their hand in his jaws as a sign of trust. Only Tyr, the god of courage, dared step forward. As Fenrir strained against Gleipnir, the ribbon held. He roared, realizing the trick, and his teeth snapped shut, severing Tyr's hand. The gods fled, leaving him bound upon a lonely rock, howling so loud that the mountains trembled. They placed a sword between his jaws to keep them apart, and his saliva became a river of venom. Yet even as centuries passed, prophecy whispered that when Ragnarok comes, Fenrir will break free, devour the sun, and swallow Odin himself before dying at the hands of Odin's son, Vidar. Fenrir was not pure evil. He was inevitability made flesh. To the Norse, he embodied the uncontrollable power of destiny, the beast within creation that even gods cannot master. His chains were not just bonds of metal, but the fragile illusions of order that all beings depend on. And when he breaks them, the world will remember that chaos was always waiting, patiently in the dark. Jormungandr, the world's serpent. Beneath the waves of Midgard's deepest oceans, coils another of Loki's monstrous children, Jormungandr, the world's serpent. Cast into the sea by Odin himself, the serpent grew so vast that he encircled the earth, biting his own tail. His body became the invisible horizon, his breath stirred the tides, and his movements shaped the storms. In every rumble of thunder, sailors heard the echo of his shifting coils. Thor, the thunder god, became Jormungandr's eternal rival. Their hatred defined the balance of sea and sky. In one tale, Thor goes fishing with the giant Ymir, baiting his hook with an ox's head. When Jormungandr rises, the ocean boils, his eyes glow like suns, and Thor's line trembles with the weight of doom. The thunder god strikes with his hammer, and the serpent writhes so violently that the sea threatens to swallow the world. Ymir, terrified, cuts the line, letting the beast sink once more into the abyss. But destiny cannot be delayed forever. At Ragnarok, Jormungandr will rise again, spewing venom that poisons sky and sea alike. Thor will face him one final time, striking the serpent dead with Melnir, only to take 9 steps before collapsing himself, choked by the beast's poison. The death of the god and the serpent is the death of balance, a cosmic knot untied, leaving the world to unravel. Jormungandr's image coiled through Viking art and legend as both terror and symbol. To the Norse mind, he represented the limit of knowledge, the ring that binds creation. His endless circle mirrored the shape of the cosmos itself, and when he uncoils, the world ends. Thus in every crashing wave, in every storm at sea, the Vikings felt the pulse of the world's serpent, the heartbeat of destruction slumbering beneath the waters that carried them. Sleipnir, Odin's eight-legged steed. Not all beasts in Norse myth were monstrous. Some, like Sleipnir, carried the weight of gods. Sleipnir was no ordinary horse. He had 8 legs and could run faster than wind over land, sea, and even through the air. His birth was as strange as his nature. Loki, in one of his many transformations, once took the form of a mare to distract a giant stallion during the building of Asgard's walls. From that union came Sleipnir, a gray stallion so swift and noble that Odin claimed him as his mount. Sleipnir became the bridge between worlds. He carried Odin to Jotunheim for treaties, to Helheim to seek prophecy, and across the cosmos in pursuit of wisdom. His 8 legs symbolized the 8 directions of existence, or perhaps the 8 legs of the bier upon which the dead were carried, making Sleipnir both messenger and omen. When Odin rode him into battle, his hooves thundered like drums of fate, and even the Valkyries followed his shadow. In many sagas, Sleipnir's journeys mirror Odin's own transformation from warrior to wanderer, from ruler to seeker. The horse was not simply transport. He was a companion through the unknown, the link between life and death, dream and reality. In later folklore, Sleipnir's hoofprints were said to mark stones and mountains across the land, reminders that the gods once rode among men. Through Sleipnir, the Norse expressed their reverence for movement, for the restless spirit that crosses boundaries and seeks understanding. It was proof that even in a world filled with monsters, there was beauty born from chaos, loyalty forged in the strangest of origins. Sleipnir galloped not only across realms, but through the imagination of an entire culture, the embodiment of divine motion itself, the Norns, weavers of fate. At the base of Yggdrasil, where time itself takes root, sit the Norns, 3 women who weave the destinies of gods and men alike. Their names are Urd the past, Verdand the present, and Skuld the future. From their loom flows the tapestry of existence, every thread a life, every knot a choice, every cut an ending. Even Odin, for all his wisdom and sacrifice, bows to their decrees. For the Norns weave without mercy, guided not by emotion, but by the unyielding rhythm of fate. They draw water from the sacred well of Yggdrasil, pouring it over Yggdrasil's roots to keep the cosmos alive. Yet they also carve runes into the bark of the world tree, symbols that decide who shall live, who shall fall, and when even the gods must die. The Norns do not speak of fairness, for to them, destiny is neither kind nor cruel. It simply is. Sometimes they appear to mortals as wise women, spinning under moonlight, whispering of futures that cannot be avoided. Sometimes they visit kings and heroes in dreams, leaving them with a chill the knowledge of their own doom. To the Vikings, the Norns were both comfort and terror, proof that no power could escape the web of existence. In the Norse worldview, fate was not a prison but a companion. The Norns remind us that every thread, no matter how fragile, contributes to the vast pattern. The gods fight, mortals struggle, yet all follow the silent rhythm of the loom. And when the final thread is cut, it is not the end, only the moment the pattern is revealed. Prophecy of Ragnarok, the end of all things. All Norse tales lead to one chilling vision: Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. The seers foretold that one day the bonds of the cosmos would break. Fenrir would shatter his chains. Gormengander would rise from the sea, and Surtur would stride from Muspelheim with a sword of fire. The sun and moon would be devoured, plunging the world into endless night. 3 winters would come without summer, Fimbulwinter, a season of despair that would shatter men's hearts. The gods knew this fate and could not escape it. Odin prepared his warriors in Valhalla for the final battle. Thor polished Mjolnir, tear-trained without a hand. Heimdall watched the horizon, yet they understood that no preparation could stop the turning of destiny. For Ragnarok was not merely an ending, it was a cleansing. The old world must burn, so a new one might grow from its ashes. When the horn sounds, the armies of gods and monsters will meet upon the plain of Vigrid. Odin will fall to Fenrir. Thor to the serpent, Loki and Heimdall will slay each other, and the world will sink beneath waves of fire and flood. But from the darkness, the earth will rise again, green and pure. 2 humans, Leif and Lithracer, will survive, hiding within Yggdrasil, and they will repopulate the reborn world. Ragnarok was not despair to the Norse. It was truth. The cycle of destruction and renewal reflected their understanding of nature itself. Winter always returns, yet so does spring. Death takes all, yet life persists. And thus, even as their gods marched toward their doom, the Vikings saw in Ragnarok not fear, but a promise, that from ruin, creation will always begin anew.
Valkyries?
Choosers of the slain. High above the clash of swords and screams of dying men, the Valkyries rode through the smoke of battle. Their armor shimmered like moonlight on blood. Their steeds galloped across the sky, leaving trails of frost and flame. They were not angels, nor demons, but choosers of the slain divine maidens sent by Odin to gather those who died with courage. The Vikings saw them as the final sight before death. Beautiful. Terrible beings who lifted fallen warriors from the field, their spears gleaming with runic fire. Each Valkyrie knew the names of those destined to die. To some, they brought glory, to others, mercy. And as they rode, ravens followed, feasting on the dead, symbols of Odin's ever-hungry wisdom. The Valkyries did not mourn, they selected. For in Norse belief, death in battle was not an end, but a passage. Those chosen were carried to Valhalla, the hall of the slain, where they would feast, fight, and train for the coming of Ragnarok. The Valkyries, too, served their pouring mead, singing songs of old victories and watching as the warriors tested their strength anew each day. Yet the Valkyries were more than servants. In older sagas, they wielded their own wills and desires, sometimes falling in love with mortals or defying Odin himself. They were weavers of fate, not merely tools of it. On dark nights, their cries could be heard across the fjords, not of grief, but of prophecy. Their flight was the whisper of destiny, the reminder that death chooses none by chance. To the Norse mind, the Valkyries embodied the beauty of inevitability, fierce divine figures who turned slaughter into meaning. They reminded men that valor could defy oblivion, and that even in death, a warrior's spirit might rise to dine with gods. Valhalla, the Hall of Heroes. Imagine a hall so vast that its roof is made of golden shields, its rafters of spears, and its gates wide enough for hundreds of warriors to march through side by side. This is Valhalla, Odin's chosen hall in Asgard, a place where the bravest of the fallen are reborn into eternal battle and endless glory. Here, those selected by the Valkyries awaken not to rest, but to fight once more. Each morning, they clash with one another upon the endless plains, testing their might in combat that ends only with sunset. Their wounds heal as the feast begins, and Bor-Sarimner is cooked anew each night, reborn from its bones by Odin's magic. Rivers of mead flow from the udders of the goat Hydrun, and laughter echoes louder than thunder. But Valhalla is not mere paradise. It is preparation. Every battle, every feast, every boast serves a greater purpose, to ready these warriors for Ragnarok, the final war of the gods. Odin watches over them, knowing that when the horn of doom sounds, he will call upon his army of the dead to march beside him. The Einherjar, as these warriors are called, live each day in joyful anticipation of destruction. In Valhalla, death loses its sting. Pain becomes pride, and defeat is but another verse in a saga without end. It is a realm of eternal defiance, where warriors stand unbroken before fate itself. To die in bed was shame. To die with sword in hand was transcendence. And so, Valhalla became not just a mythic hall, but the heartbeat of Viking courage, echoing through every storm, every raid, every song of the sea. Hell and the forgotten dead. But not all who die find glory. Beyond the warmth of Valhalla lies a realm of silence and shadows, Helheim. Ruled by Hel, the daughter of Loki, cast down by Odin for her half-dead visage, one side beautiful and alive, the other rotten and pale. Hel became queen of those who died without valor, the sick, the old, the forgotten. Her hall Eljudnir was cold and vast, with walls made of corpses and a roof tiled with snakes. Hel was no torturer, no fiend. Her rule was not cruelty, but remembrance. She welcomed all who were abandoned by memory. In her halls, souls drifted like autumn leaves, neither punished nor rewarded, merely existing in the quiet afterlife that awaits those untouched by glory. for the Norse believed that to be forgotten was the truest death of all. Sometimes Odin himself sought her counsel, as when Baldr, his beloved son, was slain. He sent a messenger to plead for Baldr's return. Hel agreed only on one condition, that every being in the world should weep for him. Yet one creature, a giantess in disguise, refused. Thus, Baldr remained in her realm, proving that even love and grief could not overturn the laws of fate. Hel's domain reflected the Norse understanding of death, not as punishment, but as inevitable stillness. Where Valhalla burned with song, Helheim whispered with memory. Where the gods prepared for war, Hel prepared for endurance. She was the keeper of the final silence, the half-light between existence and oblivion. To the Vikings, Hel was terrifying, not because she was cruel, but because she was true. In her stillness, they saw their own mortality. In her gaze, they recognized the shadow of every forgotten name, waiting patiently at the edge of memory. Sigurd and the dragon Fafnir. In the shadowed mists of the Norse age, among heroes and beasts alike, none shone brighter than Sigurd, son of Sigmund and descendant of the Valsund bloodline. His tale was one of courage, betrayal, and destiny, a saga etched in the very runes of fate. Trained by the dwarf Regin, Sigurd was told of the monstrous dragon Fafnir, a creature who once was a man but was cursed by greed and transformed by the venom of his own avarice. Fafnir guarded a hoard of gold-cursed treasure that shimmered like firelight in the darkness, whispering madness to any who touched it. Regin, desiring that gold, convinced Sigurd to slay the beast. Sigurd forged his legendary sword Gram, reforged from the broken shards of his father's blade. It was said to be so sharp that it could cleave an anvil in half. On Regin's guidance, he dug a pit along Fafnir's path and hid within it as the dragon crawled toward its watering hole. As the ground trembled and the air filled with poisonous mist, Sigurd thrust upward, piercing Fafnir's heart. The beast's blood soaked the soil, hissing like acid, and his dying breath cursed the treasure, warning the young hero that gold brings death. When Sigurd tasted the dragon's blood, he gained the gift of understanding the language of birds. They whispered to him the truth, that Regin planned to betray and kill him for the gold. Acting swiftly, Sigurd struck first, ending his master's deceit. He then mounted his horse Grani, a descendant of Odin's steed Sleipnir, and rode into legend, carrying both the dragon's treasure and the burden of its curse. Yet, from that victory sprouted tragedy. For Sigurd's tale was no mere triumph, it was the beginning of doom. The cursed gold would weave a web of love and betrayal that no sword could cut. Brynhildr, the tragic Valkyrie, among the burning skies of Asgard. Brynhildr was once a Valkyrie, a chooser of the slain and servant of Odin. But her defiance changed everything. When she disobeyed Odin's order and saved a warrior, he wished to die. The Allfather punished her with a cruel fate. She was cast from the heavens, condemned to mortal sleep behind a wall of fire, till a man brave enough to cross it would awaken her. That man was Sigurd. Drawn by destiny, he rode through the flames and found her, sleeping in radiant armor, her golden hair like sunlight on ice. When she awoke, she saw in Sigurd the courage of the gods themselves. They fell deeply in love, swearing eternal vows. But the curse of the dragon's gold followed Sigurd like a shadow. When the magic of deceit was cast by a treacherous king named Gunnar, Sigurd was bewitched into forgetting Brynhildr and married another Gudrun. Through sorcery, he even disguised himself as Gunnar to pass the flames again and claim Brynhildr on Gunnar's behalf. When she learned the truth, Brynhildr's heart shattered, her wrath became divine. She demanded Sigurd's death, and though regret soon followed, fate would not release her. As Sigurd was murdered in his sleep, Brynhildr joined him in death, throwing herself upon his funeral pyre. Flames consumed them both, hero and Valkyrie united at last in the blaze that mirrored their love. Her ashes whispered of betrayal and eternal longing, and from her story would grow the tragic heart of the Volsunga saga, where passion and fate could not be undone, even by the gods themselves. The Saga of Volsunga, the bloodline of doom. The Volsunga saga was more than just Sigurd's tale. It was a tapestry of blood and vengeance stretching across generations. Born from the union of wolf spirits, kings, and cursed treasures, The Volsungs were heroes forged in the furnace of chaos. From Sigmund, who pulled the sword from Odin's tree, to Signy, who endured unthinkable pain to avenge her kin, their family embodied both divine favor and eternal doom. The gods had once smiled upon them, but their line was forever bound to the cursed horde of Fafnir. Gold that burned, love that destroyed, and honor that demanded blood, these were the legacies of the Volsungs. The saga tells of revenge upon revenge, a spiral of fate that echoed the Norse belief that destiny was inescapable. Even when heroes triumphed, they did so at the cost of everything: family, love, and their own lives. The story closes not with victory, but with fire and ruin. Sigurd's death rippled through kingdoms, sparking wars that consumed both men and gods alike. The Volsungs became a warning that even the mightiest bloodlines could not escape the threads woven by the Norns. There, Saga stood as a mirror to the human condition, where glory and grief are inseparable, and every victory hides a curse in its heart. The tale of Beowulf in Norse context. Before it was inked into the Christianized manuscript we know today, the tale of Beowulf was born from the same winds that carried Norse sagas across frozen seas. It was a story steeped in the pagan spirit of Northern Europe, where men were forged by cold, war, and fate. Beowulf, the hero from Geatland, embodied the virtues that the Norse held sacred: courage, loyalty, and the eternal hunger for fame. He fought not for wealth or power, but to carve his name into the endless night of oblivion, for to be forgotten was the truest death. When Beowulf faced Grendel, the monstrous descendant of Cain, he did so without weapons, relying only on his strength and will. It was an act that mirrored the Norse idea of honor through struggle, the belief that a warrior must face chaos with bare courage, no matter the odds. Grendel's defeat was not just a victory of man over monster, but of light over the creeping void, a moment where human valor burned against the darkness of an uncaring world. Yet in true Norse fashion, every triumph carried the shadow of doom. Beowulf's descent into the lake to confront Grendel's mother echoed the mythic underworld journeys of Odin and Hermod, a hero venturing into death's domain to restore balance. The creatures he faced were not merely physical beasts, but symbols of the chaos that the Norse believed always lurked beneath creation. Beowulf's victory reaffirmed that the world's fragile order depended on human will, that every age required its heroes to hold back the storm. But time, the greatest enemy, came for Beowulf as it came for all. His final battle against the dragon was a reflection of Ragnarok itself, the endless cycle of destruction and rebirth. As he slew the beast, the dragon's fire consumed him. His people mourned not only their king but an era. The death of Beowulf was the fading of the heroic age, the moment when gods and monsters began to retreat into memory, leaving men alone beneath a silent sky. The poem that bore his name became a eulogy for a lost world, one where courage was a religion and death a form of glory. The Viking Code: honor, revenge, and afterlife. Live as a Viking was to live by the code, an invisible law, older than kings, older even than the gods. It was not written in parchment, but etched into the marrow of every soul born under the northern lights. Honor was its first commandment. It was better to die standing than to live in shame. Betrayal was the deepest sin. Vengeance, the holiest duty. To break one's word was to invite eternal scorn, a stain that no saga could wash away. The Norse saw life as a brief spark between two voids, the before and after of existence, and they sought to make that spark blaze bright. To die in battle, weapon in hand, was to ascend to Valhalla, Odin's hall, where warriors feasted, fought, and died again each day in preparation for Ragnarok. Those who died without courage would instead wander the mists of Helheim, forgotten by gods and men alike. Thus every Viking's heart beat to the same rhythm: fight bravely, die well, and live forever in song. This ethos shaped not only men, but women. Norse women, often misjudged by later historians, were fierce custodians of family honor. They wielded influence behind the hearth, their words carrying the weight of fate. A mother's vow of vengeance could ignite wars. A wife's curse could doom a clan. In the sagas, we see them as weavers of destiny, shaping bloodlines and oaths as deftly as the Norns wove threads upon their loom. To the Norse, life itself was a battlefield of reputation. Deeds outlived flesh. The only immortality worth seeking was the one sung by Skald's poets, who immortalized heroes in verse. Their code was simple, yet absolute. Cattle die, kinsmen die. You yourself must die, but the fame of a noble name never dies. It was both their creed and their curse. For in seeking eternal glory, many Vikings met early graves, but never meaningless ones. The runes, magic, symbols, and language of the gods. Before ink and paper, before churches and chronicles, there were runes, sharp. Angular marks carved into wood, stone, or bone, carrying power that was both divine and dangerous. To the Norse, each rune was not a mere letter, but a living force, a spark of cosmic truth. The word rune itself meant mystery or whisper, for these symbols were not meant to be spoken lightly. They were born from pain and revelation, discovered by Odin himself through the ultimate act of sacrifice. In the myth of Odin's ordeal, the All-Father hung upon Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and nights. Pierced by his spear, without food or drink, he offered himself to himself. On the 9th night, gazing into the abyss, the runes revealed themselves, glowing symbols of the universe's hidden laws. In that moment, Odin gained not only wisdom, but the keys to shaping destiny. From then on, the runes became a bridge between gods and mortals, between thought and reality. Each rune carried a distinct essence. Fahu represented wealth and prosperity, Uruz strength and endurance, Alges protection from harm. Warriors carved runes onto their blades before battle. Lovers etched them into gifts as oaths of eternal faith. Skalds used them in spells and charms, invoking the favor of unseen powers. But the runes demanded respect. To misuse them was to invite chaos, for their power could heal or destroy, bless or curse. Rune stones rose across the Viking world like immortal echoes of human lives. They marked graves, victories, and journeys, standing tall against wind and time. Through these carvings, the dead spoke to the living, and the living reached for eternity. In the Norse view, to carve one's story in stone was to defy the oblivion that awaited all things. Even now, the runes endure ancient symbols, still whispering of a world where magic was real and wisdom was bought with blood. The end did not come suddenly. It crept upon the 9 realms like frost upon a grave. The Fimbulwinter, the Great Winter, arrived without warning and without mercy. Snow fell for 3 unbroken years. No warmth, no harvest, no dawns unbitten by the cold. Brothers turned against brothers, fathers against sons, woed. Hunger hollowed the land, and the cries of the dying mingled with the howling winds. Even the gods felt the silence, for the warmth of the sun and moon dimmed, as if the cosmos itself was losing its breath. In Asgard, Odin looked into the well of Ymir and saw what he had long feared, the end of all things. The omens gathered like vultures, the howling of wolves' skull, and Hati chasing the sun and moon ever closer, the trembling of Yggdrasil's roots, the weeping of the Norns, whose threads began to fray. Even the mightiest gods grew restless. They sharpened weapons, forged alliances, and waited for a war that could not be escaped. Across the realms, monsters stirred. The chains that bound Fenrir began to strain. The seas churned as Jormungandr shifted in the deep, its body encircling the world. Flames rose from Muspelheim, licking at the heavens. The frost giants rallied beneath a sky cracked by thunder. All creation seemed to hold its breath. But the gods knew this was not a tragedy. It was destiny. From the very birth of the world, when Odin and his brothers slew Ymir, the seed of destruction had been sown. The gods themselves were bound by fate, as much as the mortals who worshipped them. The Fimbulwinter was not a curse, but a fulfillment, the great cycle of life and death. Creation and ruin, beginning its final turn. The battle of Ragnarok. When the final dawn came, it was crimson, not from sunrise, but from fire. The sky split open as Surtur, the giant of flame, strode from Muspelheim, wielding his burning sword. Crossed the heavens, Nagelfar, the ship made from the nails of the dead, broke free from its moorings. Its sails caught a black wind as Loki, newly escaped from his chains, stood at its helm, grinning as he led his monstrous army toward Asgard. The time of gods was over, and they knew it. Odin summoned the Einherjar, the fallen warriors of Valhalla, and rode forth upon Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed. At his side rode Thor, hammer crackling with lightning and tear, his single hand clutching a sword of unbreakable will. Heimdall's horn, Jallarhorn, sounded across the worlds, a call so loud it shook the souls of gods and men alike. It was the sound of inevitability. The battlefield Vigrid stretched beyond sight, a wasteland where gods, giants, and beasts collided in an orgy of chaos. Thor met Jormungandr, and their duels split the sea. Lightning clashed with poison. Thunder roared against the hiss of the serpent. When Thor crushed the beast's skull, he took 9 steps before falling dead from its venom. Odin faced Fenrir, knowing the prophecy that foretold his doom. He fought bravely, spear against fangs, until the wolf swallowed him whole. Yet before the creature could savor its victory, Vidar, Odin's silent son, avenged him, tearing Fenrir apart with his bare hands. Loki and Heimdall found each other amid the slaughter, their blades clashing in fury and hatred. Both struck true, and both fell, their deaths sealing the fates they had shaped since the beginning. At last, Surtur raised his sword high and brought it down upon the world. Flames consumed the sky, the seas boiled, and Yggdrasil shuddered as the cosmos collapsed into ash. Ragnarok had come, and the gods were no more. The death of Odin and Thor. The fall of Odin and Thor was more than the death of gods. It was the death of order itself. Odin, the seeker of wisdom, who had sacrificed eye and blood for knowledge, met his end not in peace, but in the jaws of the chaos he had long feared. His death was not failure, but fulfillment. The All-Father had always known that even wisdom could not outrun fate. His last act was to whisper to Vidar, his son, the words of the old world's rebirth. Thor's final breath was thunder. He had lived as the defender of mankind, striking down giants, trolls, and serpents, yet his greatest foe was destiny itself. When he faced Jormungandr, he faced the mirror of his own might, a creature born to destroy, as he was born to protect. When the serpent fell, its venom took him, and the skies wept lightning. The protector of Midgard was gone, and the world trembled without its shield. But there was beauty in their ending. Odin and Thor did not fade in weakness. They fell in glory, ensuring that their names would echo through eternity. In their deaths, they became symbols of the Norse truth, that even gods must bow before fate. But courage in the face of doom is a victory all its own. As the flames of Surtur swallowed the heavens, the voices of fallen warriors rose, not in terror, but in defiance. The world burned, the seas swallowed continents, mountains crumbled, and stars vanished into darkness. Yet amid the ruin, the essence of Odin and Thor lingered, their spirits bound not to the heavens but to memory. For in Norse belief, memory was stronger than death, and in that memory, the gods lived on. The world after Ragnarok, rebirth of the earth. From the ashes of the old world rose silence, deep, endless cleansing. The seas stilled and the smoke drifted away. Slowly, the earth began to heal. Green shoots broke through the scorched soil, and rivers ran once more. The sun, reborn from her devoured mother, rose bright and new. The world once broken began again, smaller, gentler, but alive. To humans, Leif and Liththracer emerged from the wood of Hodmimus Holt, where they had hidden from the flames. They carried no weapons, no gods, no sagas, only hope. From them, the new generations would grow, and the cycle of life would begin anew. The air was pure, the land fertile, and for a moment, peace seemed possible. Among the survivors were a few gods, Vidar and Vali, sons of Odin, Modi and Magni, sons of Thor, carrying their father's hammer. They stood beneath the new sun, silent, yet unbroken. They remembered the old world, but did not weep for it. In their hearts burned a quiet promise that wisdom, courage, and sacrifice would guide the age to come. The Norse saw this not as a happy ending, but as a necessary one. Destruction and rebirth were not opposites, but partners in an eternal dance. Every world must die for another to rise. And so, the wheel turned once more from ash to earth, from death to life. The surviving gods, Baldr returns. Amid the renewal came Baldr, the radiant god of light reborn from hell's shadow. Once slain by Loki's deceit, he now returned to the new earth as a symbol of purity and forgiveness. His coming marked the dawn of a gentler age, one without the vengeance and strife that had consumed the old gods. He walked upon the green hills, his laughter like the music of spring, and the surviving gods bowed before him. Baldr's resurrection was the universe's apology, the mending of what had been torn apart. He forgave even Loki's treachery, for in the new world there was no place for hate. Light shone brighter than before, and the scars of the old battles faded beneath it. In his eyes, the gods saw hope, a chance to learn from their ruin, to guide the new mankind toward harmony rather than conquest. Yet even in peace, memory endured. The gods remembered their fallen kin, Odin's wisdom, Thor's might, Freya's love. Baldr honored them not through tears, but through the rebuilding of life. The halls of Asgard were gone, but in the hearts of gods and men their echoes remained. Baldr's reign marked the renewal of divine order, not of rule and war, but of balance and grace. He was the light after the storm, the calm after centuries of thunder. The cycle had completed itself and begun again. Legacy of the Norse, myth, memory, and modern echoes. Though the gods vanished and the sagas turned to legend, their legacy endured. The Norse myths were never meant to die. They lived in the whisper of the wind, the crash of waves, and the courage of men who still face the darkness unafraid. The Vikings who once sailed under Odin's watch may be gone, but their spirit remains in every act of defiance against fate. In every sacrifice for honor, in every storyteller who dares to keep their names alive. Modern eyes see myth as fiction, but to the Norse, it was truth, not in fact, but in meaning. Their gods were reflections of human struggle, flawed, proud, passionate, and doomed. Through them, the ancients explored what it meant to exist in a universe both cruel and magnificent. Ragnarok was not the end, but a reminder that even gods fall, and that from ruin comes renewal. Today, Yggdrasil still stands not in the heavens, but in the stories we tell, the symbols we wear, and the lessons we inherit. Odin's sacrifice teaches us that wisdom demands pain. Thor's courage reminds us that strength without purpose is hollow, and Baldr's return promises that light always follows darkness. In the end, Norse mythology is not a tale of gods, but of us, of humanity's eternal quest to find meaning in chaos. The sagas may fade, but the fire that birthed them burns still, carried through time by every heart that dares to remember. And so, the great saga of Norse mythology reaches its end, a cycle of creation, destruction, and rebirth that mirrors the heartbeat of existence itself. From the yawning void of Ginnungagap to the fiery ruin of Ragnarok, we've witnessed gods rise and fall, monsters awaken, and heroes carve their names into eternity. Yet the myths never truly die. They breathe in the thunder, whisper in the winds of the fjords, and live on in every story told around the fire when the night grows long and the world feels ancient again. But here's the truth. The sagas never say outright. Ragnarok wasn't the end. It was renewal. From the ashes of the old gods, new ones emerged. From the silence after the storm came a new dawn. That's why these tales still matter, because they remind us that even when everything burns, something beautiful always rises from the smoke. The Norse didn't fear the end. They prepared for it. And perhaps that's what we should all take from these myths. Courage in the face of the inevitable. If this journey through the Norse cosmos stirred something within you, the call of adventure, the thrill of forgotten gods, then don't let it end here. Hit subscribe to step deeper into the shadows of myth and history, drop a like to honor the fallen heroes of Asgard, and share this saga with those who still believe that legends are more than just stories. 'Cause here, we don't just tell tales, we resurrect them. The gods may have fallen, but our exploration of the strange, the sacred, and the forgotten has only just begun. Stay curious, stay fearless, and remember, even gods can die, but legends live forever.